I'm going to give a neutral argument to why we need to control immigration, or why we need to control immigration a little bit more in the next few decades. So the neutral argument to explain why people are getting frustrated down to how many immigrants are coming in is because in the last 20 to 30 years, there keeps on happening, different migrant crises. There keeps on happening one migrant crisis after another, because they're leaving their countries because of oppression, bigotry, poverty, authoritarianism, like left-wing authoritarianism, or fascism, which is right-wing authoritarianism. So there keeps on happening these migrant crises because of different things like the Syrian refugee crisis, where because you had ISIS interfering with the Syrian Assyrian civil war. But a lot of Syrian people started fleeing the country because of that, and there's different things like that keep on happening. And the reason why people are getting frustrated is because what I think we're basically seeing 100 years of immigration happening in the space or in the time frame of 20 to 30 years. And that's not giving people native, indigenous, white British people, it's not giving people enough time to acclimate to the new, or get used to the new political and social climate of having more brown and black people, whether it's Indian people, whether it's African people, black people, because we're seeing all this immigration, 100 years of immigration happening in the time frame of 30 years. It's not giving people enough time to get used to this new social climate, and to this new ethnic demographic in their country. And I'm going to go into a little bit how racism is kind of created. And in my philosophy of the natural mixing of the races, is that it's about how the more the races mix, the more you'll naturally combat racism and discrimination, because the more you get to know a certain group of people, the more you accept to, the more you embrace them, and get to know them as just as regular human beings. And in the natural mixing of the races, this process has been going on for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And immigration is meant to happen over a period, over a steady period of 100 years. But we're seeing it happening too quickly for people to get used to it. And what it is if you grow up with majority white neighborhoods, or just white neighborhoods, or a white country, you're going to perceive your perceptions and how you perceive people. You're going to perceive being around white people as normal, and then when you start having different ethnicities like Indians or African people getting introduced to your society, because your perspective has gotten used to seeing white people, all of a sudden, being faced with something that you're not familiar with, people are afraid of things that they don't understand. People are afraid of change and afraid of things that they're not used to. But we're meant to see immigration happening in a slow pace, and we're meant to see like a few people like coming in gradually. And because we're seeing so many immigrants coming into the country like very, very quickly, it's not giving people's perceptions enough time to get used to the things that they're perceiving. And then because it's happening too quickly, people can't get used to it, and then it's causing them to have like racial discriminatory type opinions, racist opinions or whatever. So the reason why we need to control immigration, for the next like 50 years and slow it down a little bit, is to slow down the pace to give people's perceptions enough time to get used to seeing people of different ethnicities in their neighborhoods. So, in that aspect, that will imply that, we do need to control immigration and slow it down a little bit. Not completely stop it, but slow it down for people to get used to it. And in my philosophies of the natural mixing of the races, the thing that creates racism is basically what I call racial isolation. So if you have like a community of 100 people that are all white, that's racial isolation. If you have 100 people and 10 of them are black, then that's also racial isolation because it's vast majority white. If you have 50% white and 50% black, but then they're segregated, then that's still racial isolation. So the example where racial isolation would be completely gone is where you'd have like a community of, say, like 100 people where it's all equally mixed. So like an example of a society where the races are equally mixed is you'd have like on a street or, an apartment building with the apartments, but let's focus on like the streets. You would have like a white family, a black family, an Asian Chinese family, what's the other one? A Polish family, and then you basically have that repeat. So then you'd have like then you'd have a white family, a black family, a Chinese family, an Indian family. So where you have a society where everything is equally mixed and there's no racial isolation, there would be no racism, and that's the goal in which ideally you want to get society to. But that is meant to happen over a period of, in this instance, it's going to be like in 100 years. That's what you want to get to the point of. And if there was a society where it was equally mixed, in that example where I said, where every house, it goes from one race to another, one ethnicity or whatever to another, in order to get to that point, hundreds and thousands of years and the peak of the natural mixing of the races would have happened. This process would have already happened for like, say, like 100 years. So like in 100 years' time, if you had that equally mixed community, because it took 100 years to get there in the present time frame, by that time people get used to it. But if you're suddenly forcing that on people all of a sudden, it causes people, it's going to trigger racist opinions because it's not giving people enough time to acclimate to the new social and ethnic climate. Like, so yeah. I try to explain that the best I can. But that was a neutral reason why why we would need to control immigration, give people enough time to acclimate to new social and ethnic and different demographics and different climates and things like that. And I've explained a little bit of natural mixing of the races philosophy. And ideally, my vision is a world where every country is equally mixed. Because in that society that takes, and that, like, that's not going to happen for thousands of years. yet again. But in that example of that world where everything's equally mixed, because there's no racial isolation, there can be no racism in the world. But like I said, in order to get to that place, it does take a very, very long time.